The alien empire, known as the Xantarii, had conquered countless planets, each one more advanced than the last. With their superior technology and unstoppable forces, they had no doubt that Earth would fall within days. Their fleet, a massive armada of ships capable of destroying entire cities with a single blast, was poised above the planet. The leader of the Xantarii, Emperor Xerok, looked down at Earth from his command ship, smiling to himself. It was going to be an easy victory. On the ground, human forces were scrambling. The military, though experienced, was outmatched. They had no space fleet, no advanced weapons, and no hope of defeating the aliens in direct combat. But what the Xantarii didn't know was that humanity had something they could never predict: a relentless drive to survive, an adaptability the aliens had never encountered. The first wave of the Xantarii forces hit Earth with full force. Cities burned, and countless lives were lost as the alien ships unleashed their devastating weaponry. But the humans, despite the destruction, did not crumble. Instead, they fought back with something far more dangerous than weapons strategy. As the Xantarii advanced through the burning cities, they were surprised to find that human soldiers, though vastly outnumbered, were not retreating in fear. Instead, they were disappearing into the chaos, leaving behind only the wreckage of their homes. The alien forces would sweep through a block, expecting to find nothing but devastation, but instead, they found human soldiers attacking from all angles. There were ambushes, traps, and sniper attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. No matter how many of their soldiers the Xantarii killed, more humans seemed to rise, fighting back in ways the aliens couldn't understand. Emperor Xerok grew frustrated. His soldiers, well-trained and equipped with weapons far beyond anything Earth had ever seen, were beginning to report strange losses. The humans were everywhere, and yet nowhere. It was as if they were in two places at once, fighting from the shadows, always out of reach, always one step ahead. "What are they doing?" Xerok muttered, standing at the observation window of his ship. "How are they holding their ground? We should have crushed them by now." His chief strategist, Commander Zorn, stood beside him, watching the chaos unfold below. "I don't know, my lord. They are unpredictable. We've never encountered this before. Their soldiers fight with no regard for their own safety, pushing forward despite impossible odds." Xerok clenched his fists. "We'll flush them out. We'll show them that no one can stand against the Xantarii." The aliens began to change their approach, sending in larger battalions to overwhelm the humans. But still, the humans adapted. They fought not in open battle, but through guerrilla tactics. They would attack in small, highly coordinated groups, taking out alien supply lines, sabotaging equipment, and destroying vital communication networks. Each strike left the Xantarii more confused than before. Days turned into weeks, and the humans showed no signs of backing down. The Xantarii forces, despite their overwhelming power, were starting to falter. The surprise was not just the humans' resilience, it was their ability to adapt and survive. The Xantarii had expected a quick, brutal war, but the humans had turned every battle into a test of endurance. One night, as Xerok sat in his quarters, the screens before him flickered to life. A report came in from one of his commanders. "We've lost contact with a third of our fleet, Emperor. Our communication systems are failing. The humans are attacking our ships directly." Xerok's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? How are they attacking our ships?" He couldn't believe it. The humans had no space fleet, no technology capable of reaching their ships. We've been unable to receive any signals from the fleet. They've been sneaking aboard our ships, using the very chaos we caused to infiltrate our ranks." Xerok's anger exploded. How is this possible? They're supposed to be nothing more than a primitive species. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How could a species so inferior challenge the Xantarii in this way? The truth slowly began to dawn on him. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, but their ability to adapt to any situation. They were not bound by the rigid rules of war that the Xantarii followed. The humans fought with an unpredictable nature, using their resourcefulness, their cunning, and their desire to protect everything they held dear. They could not be predicted, and that made them dangerous. By the time Xerox sent out another wave of attacks, the humans had already moved. They had sabotaged supply depots, struck at alien power sources, and even captured vital alien leaders. Each victory made them more confident. The Xantarii had underestimated humanity. The aliens thought they had won the war, but now they were losing it. As the battles raged on, Sarek realized something crucial. The more the Xantarii tried to defeat the humans, the more they seemed to multiply. The human forces, though small, were everywhere. It was as if they were part of the very earth they fought to protect, resilient, stubborn, and impossible to break. The alien empire, once so sure of their victory, was now in retreat. Their fleet had been decimated, their morale shattered, and their empire thrown into chaos. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had beaten the Xantarii. Zarek's final words, as he ordered his forces to retreat, were a bitter acknowledgement. We never should have underestimated them. And so, Earth was saved, not by overwhelming firepower, but by the very thing that had always made humanity strong: their ability to fight, adapt, and survive, no matter the odds. The Xantarii learned the hard way that no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever defeat a species that was always willing to fight back. The skies above Earth darkened as the alien invasion fleet descended. The Norathians, a ruthless and technologically superior race, had been watching humanity for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were confident in their victory. They had crushed worlds far more powerful than Earth in mere hours, and they believed no human army could stand against them. On the ground, the situation looked grim. Earth's military forces had never faced an enemy like the Norathians. With their advanced weapons and massive warships, the invaders seemed unstoppable. Human soldiers, though brave, were outmatched. They could only fight with what they had: guns, tanks, and the strength of their spirit. General Mark Stevenson, a seasoned officer, stood at the command center, watching the monitors flicker with updates. "We're outgunned," he muttered, staring at the footage of the enemy fleet. "But we won't give up." As the Norathian ships began to fire on major cities, humanity's resistance took shape. Cities were in flames, and millions of lives were lost in the opening hours of the attack. But something strange happened. The Norathians, expecting the humans to crumble under the weight of their superior force, found that their progress was slower than expected. The human forces were organizing. They weren't retreating. They were fighting back, not with advanced weaponry, but with tactics the Norathians couldn't predict. The Norathians had expected humans to panic, to scatter, and lose hope. But instead, they saw them rallying, forming pockets of resistance. General Stevenson knew they didn't have much time. It was in their will to fight. In the war rooms, human leaders gathered to discuss strategy. "We may not have the technology," General Stevenson said, "but we have something they don't. We have heart, and we will fight with everything we've got." Meanwhile, the Norathian fleet continued its relentless assault. Their ground forces were overwhelming the cities, pushing back the humans with ease. However, as they advanced, they started to notice something odd. Human soldiers weren't following the rules of conventional warfare. There were no predictable patterns in their attacks. One moment, human forces would retreat, and the next, they would strike from a different direction, ambushing supply lines, sabotaging vehicles, and harassing the invaders from the shadows. The Norathian commanders were baffled. How were they doing this? Commander Rylak, the Norathian leader, demanded. "Their tactics make no sense. They don't have the technology to track us, but somehow they know exactly where to hit us." The human soldiers had learned quickly. They had no choice but to improvise. Using their knowledge of the land, they set traps for the Norathians. They hid in forests, cities, and even abandoned buildings, striking when the aliens least expected it. It wasn't about technology. It was about outsmarting the invaders at every turn. As the days passed, the Norathians found themselves caught in a never-ending game of cat and mouse. For every battle they won, the humans seemed to be waiting for them, ready to strike back harder. Norathian warships, once invincible, were now being damaged in ways they couldn't understand. Earth's resistance, though small and often uncoordinated, was proving to be an unrelenting force. One day, Commander Rylak received a report from one of his reconnaissance units. "We've lost contact with several of our fleets, Commander. They're being attacked by human forces. We don't know how, but they're using something we can't track. It's like they've suddenly become ghosts." Rylak's face twisted in anger and disbelief. This can't be happening. They are supposed to be weak. Despite their frustration, the Nerathians pressed on, confident that they would soon crush humanity. They deployed even larger forces, increasing their attacks, but the humans kept coming. Every loss was a blow to the Nerathians' pride, but it only seemed to strengthen the human resolve. General Stevenson, now in constant communication with human forces around the globe, gave a simple order: we fight to the end. They can't take everything from us. And that was the turning point. The Nerathians, despite their overwhelming numbers and superior firepower, had underestimated humanity's greatest strength: their refusal to give up. Each time they thought they had won, humanity found a way to fight back. They weren't just defending their planet, they were fighting for their survival, for their homes, for their families. As the war raged on, the Nerathians began to lose their edge. Their commanders couldn't explain it. They had every advantage except one. The humans were relentless, and no matter how many battles the Nerathians won, they could not break the human spirit. Days turned into weeks, and the Nerathians realized the truth: this was a fight they couldn't win. The more they tried to crush humanity, the more resilient the humans became. Their tactics were unpredictable, their will unbreakable. The Nerathians might have had superior technology, but the humans had something far more dangerous. They never stopped fighting. Eventually, the Nerathians were forced to withdraw. They had never faced an enemy like humanity before. No matter how many battles they won, no matter how many cities they destroyed, the humans kept coming. And that was something the Nerathians could not defeat. As the invaders retreated, General Stevenson stood on the battlefield, looking at the horizon. "We may not have won every battle," he said, "but we won the war. Because the fight you can't win is the one where the enemy never gives up." And that was the truth that the Nerathians would learn the hard way. There was no victory against a species that refused to surrender. The first wave of the invaders came without warning. The Zoran Empire, a race of technologically advanced conquerors, had set their sights on Earth. Their ships, larger than anything humanity had ever seen, hovered above major cities. The sky turned dark, and the ground trembled as the first blast of their weapons shook the planet. Cities fell. Governments crumbled. People panicked. General David Harris watched from the command center, feeling the weight of the situation. The human military forces, though strong and experienced, were no match for the Zoran's superior technology. The aliens had weapons that could level entire cities with a single strike. Their ships were impenetrable. How could humanity possibly fight back? He looked out at the map, his heart sinking as he saw the alien forces sweeping across the globe. They were everywhere, unstoppable, overwhelming. The situation was dire, but he knew one thing: he couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. "I don't care how advanced their weapons are," General Harris said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "We fight. We fight for every inch of our world. We fight for our homes, for our families. We don't back down." His officers, standing nearby, exchanged uncertain glances. They all understood the odds. But Harris wasn't asking for certainty. He was asking for something else: willpower. He was asking for humanity's greatest strength, the ability to push forward, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Zorans, for all their power, underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. They thought the humans would be crushed under the weight of their advanced technology, but they had missed one crucial detail. Humans didn't know how to stop fighting. First, the battles were lost, one after another. The Zoran forces destroyed human defenses with ease, pushing forward without resistance. Yet, every time they thought they had wiped out the last of Earth's forces, they encountered something they hadn't expected: survivors. Small groups of soldiers, hidden in the rubble, launching surprise attacks. Guerrilla warfare at its finest. On the ground, human soldiers were constantly on the move, never staying in one place long enough for the aliens to locate them. They used the land, the cities, and even the underground networks to their advantage. They couldn't match the Zorans in firepower, but they had something the invaders couldn't understand, an unyielding spirit. Major Sarah Thompson, a young officer who had seen more than her fair share of battles, led a small squad through the ruined streets of a city once full of life. "They think they've won, but they don't know us," she muttered, looking at her team. "We're not going down without a fight." The squad moved quickly, striking where the Zorans least expected. A few well-placed explosives disabled enemy vehicles. Snipers from high ground picked off soldiers. And when the Zorans sent in their drones to hunt them down, the humans would vanish into the shadows, only to strike again elsewhere. At a T1 point, the Zorans decided to take matters into their own hands. They deployed their most powerful weapon, a massive energy cannon capable of wiping out entire cities in seconds. They fired it at the heart of Earth's remaining military strongholds, thinking it would end the fight once and for all. But even after the devastation, even after the cannon's deadly blast turned entire cities to dust, there was something the Zorans couldn't understand. The humans didn't give up. They rebuilt. They adapted. And they came back fighting harder than before. "We have to stop them," Commander Korlak, leader of the Zoran forces on Earth, said, pacing in frustration. "How are they still fighting? We've taken their cities, their armies. They should be finished." His lieutenant looked at the damaged cityscape. "They aren't finished, sir. Every time we think we've won, they just keep coming. They're relentless." Commander Korlak felt the weight of the realization. They had miscalculated. The Zorans had never encountered an enemy like this. Their technology, their tactics, everything had been geared toward wiping out enemies who would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. But humanity wasn't like that. They didn't surrender. Humanity's strength was in its resilience. It was in the refusal to stop fighting, no matter the cost. It was the mother fighting for her child, the soldier standing tall even when the enemy towered over him, the people who never gave up, even when the odds were stacked against them. The Zorans pushed forward, but every time they thought they had won, a new group of survivors appeared, waging war from the shadows. The Zorans could not break the human spirit. They could destroy cities, crush armies, but they couldn't destroy the will to fight that burned in the hearts of every human left on Earth. One night, after weeks of hard-fought battles, General Harris received a report from his scouts. "Sir, we've located a large concentration of Zoran forces. We have a chance to strike at their command center." It wasn't much, but it was a chance. The humans had no hope of matching the Zorans in strength, but they had learned how to fight smarter. They gathered their forces, small but determined, and made their move. They attacked at the heart of the Zoran fleet, disabling their command ships and sending the invaders into disarray. The Zorans, caught off guard by the sudden strike, began to lose control of their forces. Commander Korlak watched in horror as his empire's grip on Earth loosened. "How are they doing this?" he yelled, his voice full of disbelief. "We've destroyed their cities, their armies. They should be finished." But the Zorans were wrong. The human spirit was not something that could be destroyed. It was something that only grew stronger in the face of adversity. By the time the Zorans realized their mistake, it was too late. Their forces had been scattered, their leadership shattered. The humans had won not because they were stronger, but because their will to survive, their will to fight for their home, was unstoppable. General Harris stood in front of his remaining troops, watching the last of the Zoran ships retreat into space. "We've done it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We've shown them that the fight you can't win is the one where the will to survive never dies." And that was the truth the Zorans learned too late. No matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how hopeless the situation, if you have the will to fight, you can never truly be defeated. The Zoran Empire had done what no one thought possible. They had crushed the might of Earth's military forces, turning cities into rubble and reducing armies to ash. The invasion had been swift, overwhelming, and brutal. The human resistance had fought valiantly, but the odds had been against them from the start. Now, only a few pockets of survivors remained. General David Harris stood atop a hill, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Zorans were closing in. Their warships filled the sky, their ground forces marched like an unstoppable tide, and the once proud human cities were now nothing but memories. "This is it," Harris muttered to himself. "The last stand." His forces were small, barely a fraction of what they had once been, but they still had one thing left: their determination. The Zorans might have had the weapons, the technology, and the numbers, but they had underestimated humanity's will to fight. And now, that will was about to be tested like never before. Harris turned to his squad, a group of soldiers who had been with him through every battle, every loss, and every near-death experience. "We're not going down without a fight," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "This is our home, and we will defend it until the last breath." The soldiers nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew what was coming. They had lost everything already: families, friends, homes. But they hadn't lost hope. Not yet. Behind them, the last remaining human forces gathered, ready for the final battle. The Zorans were marching toward them, relentless and sure of their victory. They didn't expect any resistance. To them, humanity was already defeated. But they didn't know the depth of the human spirit. They didn't know that even at the end, when all seemed lost, humans would stand and fight. The first Zoran battalion appeared on the edge of the hill. Their massive war machines rumbled across the ground, kicking up dust as they advanced. The human soldiers held their ground, waiting for the moment to strike. "Ready," Harris whispered, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. The soldiers tensed, their eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. The Zorans didn't slow their march. They believed the humans were no longer a threat. But as the first wave of their forces reached the base of the hill, the human soldiers opened fire. The sky lit up with gunfire, explosions, and the roar of artillery. The ground shook as the two forces collided. The Zoran soldiers, stunned by the sudden resistance, faltered for a moment. But they quickly regrouped and pushed forward, their superior weapons cutting down human forces with brutal efficiency. Yet the humans refused to retreat. They fought back with everything they had left, every last bullet, every last ounce of strength. Harris led the charge, running alongside his soldiers, never stopping, never backing down. He knew the odds were impossible. He knew this was the end. But it didn't matter. They would make the Zorans pay for every inch of ground they gained. The battle raged on, the sounds of explosions and gunfire echoing across the battlefield. The Zorans, despite their overwhelming numbers, were slowed by the human resistance. For every soldier they lost, the humans seemed to gain strength, their desperation turning into fury. But as the hours passed, it became clear that the humans couldn't hold out forever. The Zorans were advancing, inch by inch. Human soldiers fell, one by one. Harris could see the inevitable truth. This was the last stand. There was no escaping it now. He glanced at his squad, all of them covered in dirt, blood, and sweat. They were exhausted, their ammunition nearly depleted. But their faces showed no fear. They had made their choice. They would fight until the very end. The Zorans advanced, their war machines crushing everything in their path. The human defenses were starting to crumble, but the soldiers didn't falter. The final wave was coming, the last assault that would either break them or end the war once and for all. Harris turned to his team. "We fight together," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We don't let them take what's left of our world." They made their final stand at the top of the hill, surrounded by enemies, but determined to go down fighting. The Zorans launched their final push, sending everything they had left at the humans. Yet, despite the overwhelming force, the human soldiers fought with a ferocity that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside them. Every step the Zorans took forward was met with a counterattack. Every inch of ground was fought for. But it was clear humanity was losing. The Zorans were too strong, too many, and the human forces were running out of time. Harris saw his soldiers falling, one by one, and his heart broke with each loss. Yet even as their numbers dwindled, the remaining humans fought on. They were willing to die for their planet, for their future. As the Zorans closed in, Harris gave one last command: hold the line. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the humans might pull off an impossible victory. Their attacks, fueled by desperation, were slowing the Zoran advance. But the Zorans soon overran their defenses, pushing the last of humanity's forces back. It was then, as the final wave of the Zoran soldiers surged forward, that a miracle occurred. Unexpectedly, the skies above Earth darkened once more, but this time, it wasn't the Zoran ships. It was a human fleet, a last-minute reinforcements from colonies on the outer edges of space. They had come to fight. The Zorans, caught off guard, paused for a moment. And in that moment of hesitation, the human resistance made its final push. The battle wasn't over yet. The fight for Earth had taken a turn. In the end, the last stand wasn't just about one final battle. It was about the truth that every human soldier knew, no matter how dire the situation, no matter how impossible the fight seemed, humanity would never give up. They would always rise again. The Zorans learned that the hard way. The Zoran fleet arrived in Earth's orbit without warning. They were like a swarm of dark, looming shadows against the bright blue sky, a reminder of humanity's impending doom. Their warships were massive, their technology advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Cities fell within hours, bombarded by their relentless attacks from above. General James O'Connor stood at the command center, staring at the screens displaying the alien ships hovering over Earth. The Earth Defense Force was outgunned. The Zorans had weapons capable of eradicating entire cities in an instant. And yet, O'Connor didn't feel fear. He felt something else, determination. "We've got one chance," he said, his voice steady as he addressed his team. "We may not have the technology they do, but we've got something they'll never understand. We have heart." The soldiers around him exchanged glances. They all knew the situation was grim, but there was something about O'Connor's words that sparked a fire in their hearts. Humanity had faced adversity before, but never on this scale. Still, they were not ready to surrender. O'Connor turned to his trusted officer, Lieutenant Sarah Miller. "We don't need to defeat them in a straight-up fight. We need to outthink them." Miller nodded. "We use the terrain to our advantage. Guerrilla tactics. We'll strike when they least expect it." The Zorans were confident. Their fleet was too large, their weapons too powerful. They had wiped out humanity's greatest cities in the first few days of the invasion. To them, Earth was already a lost cause. The human resistance, they believed, would soon fall in line with the others they had conquered, overwhelmed, and outmatched. But the Zorans had made one critical mistake. They didn't understand human ingenuity. They didn't understand that humanity would never back down, no matter the odds. As the Zoran forces advanced, the human soldiers scattered. They didn't have the numbers to face them head-on, so they used everything they had to stay one step ahead. Every attack was unexpected, every retreat calculated. They fought from hidden tunnels, forests, and abandoned buildings. They hit the Zorans where it hurt, sabotaging their supply lines, ambushing their patrols, and attacking their vulnerable points. The Zoran commanders couldn't understand how the humans were doing it. Their surveillance drones picked up nothing. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once. "How are they doing this?" one of the Zoran commanders demanded, looking at the battle reports. "We've got them outgunned. They shouldn't be able to keep up with us." But the humans weren't trying to keep up. They were using the land, their cities, their homes as weapons. Every place was familiar, and every human knew it like the back of their hand. The Zorans were lost in a world they couldn't comprehend. Lieutenant Miller and her team were in the heart of the city now. They had managed to steal a Zoran data chip, one that held the key to their next move. It was a small victory, but it could make all the difference. As they ran through the ruined streets, Miller paused for a moment, scanning the area. She could hear the hum of alien machines in the distance, but she didn't flinch. They had trained for this. "Everyone, stay sharp," she whispered. "We've got one shot at this." The team moved quickly, navigating through the wreckage. They knew that if the Zorans caught wind of their plan, it would be over. But they also knew that this was their chance. If they could disrupt the Zoran command structure, even for a moment, it would be enough to shift the balance in their favor. Meanwhile, General O'Connor had a plan of his own. He had gathered the last remaining human forces in a series of underground bunkers. It wasn't much, but they were ready to make a stand. The Zorans thought they had won the war, but O'Connor knew better. The human spirit was a force the Zorans couldn't measure, and that's where their biggest mistake lay. The Zoran fleet was descending once again, this time to launch their final assault on Earth's last stronghold. But before they could reach their target, O'Connor gave the order. Execute Plan Alpha. Now, a series of hidden missile silos fired, sending rockets towards the Zoran ships. The missiles weren't powerful enough to destroy the massive vessels, but they were enough to cause confusion. The Zorans scrambled to defend themselves, their ships firing on their own forces as they tried to counter the unexpected attack. For a brief moment, the Zorans were thrown off balance. It wasn't a victory, but it was enough to create chaos in their ranks. The humans had managed to buy themselves a few precious minutes. Lieutenant Miller and her team made it to the heart of the Zoran command ship. Inside, they found the central control hub, the very nerve center of the invasion. With the stolen data chip, Miller was able to hack into the system, causing a temporary shutdown of the Zorans' communication network. The Zorans were now without their central command. The human resistance, though small and outgunned, had managed to outmaneuver them once again. As Miller and her team made their escape, they knew they had made a difference, no matter how small. General O'Connor stood on the front lines, watching as the Zoran ships began to retreat. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The human forces had fought tooth and nail, using their wits and determination to outsmart the invaders. The Zorans had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and fight no matter the odds. They might have had superior weapons, but they had never faced an enemy like this before. Outgunned? Yes. Outmatched? Never. The human spirit, fueled by the will to survive, could not be measured by technology or firepower. The Zorans had learned that the hard way. And though the war was far from over, humanity had proved that even in the face of overwhelming force, they would never be defeated. General O'Connor looked at his remaining soldiers. "This isn't over yet," he said, his voice filled with determination. "But we've shown them that no matter what, we will never back down. We will fight until the very end." And with that, the human resistance moved forward, knowing that no matter how outgunned they would always find a way to fight back. Because they were never outmatched.